Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, New Frontiers in Military Intelligence, Artificial Intelligence, Machine Learning in the Cloud, sponsored by Microsoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Lieutenant General Jack Shanahan, the Director for Defense Intelligence Warfighter Support in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, Margie Palmieri, the Director of Digital Warfare Office in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, Andrew Mansfield, the Technical Director for the Navy's Space and Naval Warfare Systems Center Atlantic, and Lee Madden, the General Manager of Defense for Microsoft. The last segment, we started talking about cloud, we started talking about Agile. Andrew, I wanted to turn back to you for a second because you wanted to jump back in and talk a little bit more about this integration of cloud and Agile and really the promise it really gives to both DoD but really most organizations.
Yeah, so when I said by default, what I meant that Agile and cloud work together, it's more that, you know, Agile is a how, cloud is sort of a what and a where. But that if you fully embrace cloud, a lot of the tools and capabilities they gave you to integrate with it really lend themselves well to Agile. It's just a function of whether or not you fully embrace it. And so I just want to make sure to get that point across more than anything. And that if you do so, you can get those benefits.
And I think the point, also just to put a finer point on it, is the cloud opens the door to make Agile work even easier. You could always do Agile beforehand.
Yeah, you could do Agile with or without cloud.
Right.
But cloud actually makes it, you know, work across your entire enterprise as opposed to just within individual environments.
And it goes back to that automation piece, I think, as well. It makes automation easier. General Shanahan, talk a little bit about the automation side of this, because I'm sure you guys, to test the algorithm, to improve the algorithm that you guys are using for Project Maven, automation's key.
Well, it is everything to what we're trying to do, but what we also have to figure out over the next, say, 6 months as we field this beyond the tactical UAVs and go to these medium altitude, remotely piloted aircraft, the MQ-1, MQ-9, and then beyond, is to understand how much value has really come from automation, i.e. we're going to have to look at workflows to be able to show that how an analyst was doing business before versus how they were doing it in the future. And so this return on investment question, and this can trip people up. There's a tendency right off the bat to say, well, it's great, we're going to automate things, we're going to save thousands of people. We're very careful. There's no body of evidence right now that I've found in industry or in the military that suggests that by fielding an algorithm you can save thousands of people, because that's where programmers will naturally want to go in each of the services. Instead, we're talking about giving time back to an analyst to do what humans do best, which is reasoning and cognitive tasks. If I were to say, what is this value of automation to me, more than anything else, it's human-machine teaming. As Gary Kasparov would say in his book on deep thinking about losing the game to Deep Blue, it's not the grandmaster or the algorithm, it's the combination of the grandmaster and the algorithm working together. I see that our analysts will automate some tasks, but really what they'll do is get time back to do the contextual piece of it, to do what they were really paid to do, is to be intelligence analysts, not doing these rote sort of labor-intensive tasks.
Which is, you said, you're not going to buy your way out of the challenge of all this data, and the data is not going anywhere. It's not going to get smaller anytime soon, which actually brings us down that path to another piece of the discussion, which is, we talked a lot about the tactical edge, but getting the cloud to the tactical edge, getting those applications, getting those systems. Let me turn to Andrew, since you've been relegated as our cloud expert here to a certain extent. Pushing the cloud to the edge is not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily straightforward. What has to happen to get there?
Well, from my perspective, we need to, actually, I have to think about that one a little bit.
You have to think I threw a curveball.
Yeah, you threw a curveball, only but in that.
But the point, I guess, is, and maybe we'll pull Lee into this real quick, because the tactical edge piece is the extending the cloud is not necessarily as just you plug it in and it's ready to go. There's a bandwidth issue, there's a compute, there's storage, I mean, there's all the pieces.
It's application design, it's communications, it's keeping things updated from a software perspective. It's even hardware design when you're out there, because you're concerned about space, weight, and power. It's kind of interesting in that. Just a quick aside on the hardware side. I remember attending the Facebook Open Compute conference when it first started, and they were discussing innovative data center designs. Well, it turned out a lot of those features were things that were done in chip design well prior, that were buried in mill standards, because you have to worry about space, weight, and power, and you're concerned about things like chem bio and things like chemical and biological weapons. So you design things like positive pressure and things like that. So in my mind, it's how you treat all of those things and how you design your application and your data so that it can handle those environments. Not just how well you scale up, but how you scale down. So things like that.
Lee, jump in.
Jason, I think, and to follow up on Andrew's comments, I think the close cooperation and integration between the platform builders and the defense industrial base, the big aerospace and defense companies working with technology companies has been critical to getting closer to fully integrating cloud, which is foundational into the tactical platforms, and then pushing capability to tactical edge. If each of the two groups there is operating and developing differently, and we're not cooperating with each other, we're not going to get there as fast. You've got $1 billion a month coming from Microsoft and our largest peers in the industry going into R&D around the cloud and artificial intelligence and a couple of other things. And you've got the platform builders who are investing similar amounts in R&D, but it's spread across a broader swath. So really leveraging that technology company investment is going to be key.
And I think that you make an interesting point. The fact is that if it's not built into the platform side, it's not like a plug. You can't just be like, okay, plug in, it's in the cloud. I think people sometimes lose sight of that. They think, well, we'll just, like, we're so used to putting your email in the cloud or putting your documents in the cloud. Office 365, it's in the cloud, but somebody somewhere has to make the connection and build it in. And actually, it's a great kind of segue as well to the other piece of our conversation is as you integrate the AI piece into the mission systems, that's an additional piece that I think, Lee, you wanted to talk about because it's very similar. How do you work together within the broader community?
Absolutely. If you look at the true tactical edge, you have hardened systems out there that are built by the platform builders. Whether it's it's MCON hardening out at the edge in an aircraft or something similar on a ship or a submarine, the cloud providers and the technology companies can't build that. That's not our business. There are companies in the aerospace and defense industry who do that really well. That close integration between technology and the defense industrial base will drive that capability.
General Shanahan, you were shaking your head and when you were listening to Lee a little bit, talk a little bit about that integration. Getting this type of technology to the mission side, again, we've been talking a lot about the tactical edge. What's the challenge that you see? Are you finding as you work through Project Maven that this is not as easy as it sounds? I mean, it never is, but.
It never is. It is one of our biggest lessons so far. And what you said is there is no AI easy button. And anybody who says that has not been working at it a little bit. This idea of how do you integrate it into weapon systems, major programs of record that were never designed to be AI ready. And so this idea of integrating algorithms, which is very, in conceptual terms, simple to say drop some 70 lines of code into a major weapon system, is not that easy. There are some real challenges with that, working with the program offices. So beyond the intelligence chiefs of each of the services, it's who owns these big systems and how do you integrate effectively without putting at risk the system itself. So that's what we're spending a lot of our time right now, is just beginning to really map out that process of integrating these algorithms into the big weapon systems.
And this is why as well the users piece is so important. Who's going to be using, who's going to be,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And do you find that when you start talking to the weapon systems users, they get why this AI piece or machine learning piece is important, or is there an education area there too? There's
always going to be an education piece, but in general, I will just say the younger they are, the more receptive they are, and why didn't I have this yesterday is the common answer. And then once we start talking with them, well, can it do this? Can it do that? What if I did this? That's where we're going to learn the most, but they wanted it yesterday.
Margie, from the Navy's perspective, very similar as you talk about integrating these new technologies, emerging technologies into weapon systems. What challenges are you guys seeing?
Yeah. So on the challenge side, of course, is I'm going to unfortunately bring it back to our current requirements and resource process, which is we tend to fund and set requirements for systems as individual systems. And a lot of the data and analytics piece, especially when it gets to supporting user decision making, is around the integration of that information across those systems. So where we traditionally tend to incentivize the separation of those systems, dependencies are not good because if one system has a delay for whatever reason, contracts or technology, it could cause another system to have a delay. We actually want that integration from a data perspective. So figuring out what those architectures look like, how to make them cyber secure, and then figuring out how to bring the data together and then designing what the user really needs in order to make a decision are things that we don't just have to work through from a technology perspective, but from a process, organization, culture perspective. And those are always maybe a little bit more challenging than the technology sometimes.
Yeah, it's rarely the technology. We've heard that for years. That's always kind of changing the way people view it. And actually, that's another great segue. I'm going to turn to Andrew real quick on this one. When the cloud also requires that change of thinking, right? The change. So
Yes.
are you having conversations, for instance, with those people who run weapon systems, and how can weapon systems take advantage of this new technology called cloud?
My primary focus is, sort of easing us into it, and we're not that's sort of a separate area that I'm not directly involved in, but I know they're looking at those sorts of things because they want the same sort of advantages that cloud provides. I think the important thing to remember is that AI, ML, cloud, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. Right. It's going to be a sort of a coordinated, consolidated approach to how we embrace those technologies as they continue to move faster. In the case of the AI and machine learning, things like a real data strategy, something that a lot of folks, which is almost as much of an art as it is a science, that we have to actually develop. So we understand what our needs are, and we understand what we have. We know where it needs to be. We know how we're going to make our decisions. What data do we need? So it's things like that. From a security aspect, cloud offers, that the infrastructure, and depending upon which service model, is to be secure and is measured and can be measurable as secure. But the capabilities also have to be secure. And there are complexities with regards to hosting in a commodity space, right? For example, command and control, the concept of our operational forces being able to see what's going on there and know that there's something that they have to take care of. That's more complicated when you don't own the infrastructure outright. So those are some of the complexities, and absolutely we're looking at how they can be embraced.
General Shanahan, when you guys were moving forward with Project Maven, did the security side, did the workforce piece, did all that, how did you take into account those pieces? Because obviously the AI side was cool and interesting and innovative, but there's this, as I think Margie talked about, the culture and the workforce piece too still needs to be addressed.
Well, it does, and the way we phrase it, which goes to everything Andrew just said, all I'll say is ditto to everything he said, is how do you build an AI-ready culture? Okay. Which means everything from recruiting, initial training, retaining people, getting them in industry for longer periods so they get to experience the best. All of those are applicable to this. So it really is, the idea of a pilot project is designed to begin to understand what are all those bits and pieces that have to be put together so that you end up with an AI-ready culture.
And I think that's so important to understand that this is a pilot. Like, people want to take pilots and go, okay, we're going to move out much more quickly, but there's a huge learning that happens during. Andrew, jump in on the piece.
The learning thing is the biggest, I think, hurdle for all of us, is finding good, make sure there are people on both sides of the fence that are engaged, let's say in government and industry, who are engaged together. From a government perspective, we are looking at different sort of concepts or models on how to do competency development, we call it. That's things like what we call a guild, which is sort of a multidisciplinary thing, a group of people who are focused on advancing, analytics, for example, which, as we know, is a mix of coding and science and math and statistics. And so we're looking at ways in which we take those sorts of things broader than just within an individual organization to the Navy as a whole.
Fascinating. Now, this has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot. People forget sometimes how much AI, machine learning, and the like has really been integrated in the federal government. People always give the industry side much more credit. But we're almost out of time, so let me start on that side of the table this time. And General Shanahan, talk a little bit about the conversation today. What's some of the takeaways? What should people keep in mind as agencies, as the DoD moves out with these innovative technologies?
I'll say I'll begin with the two cautionary tales, both of which been mentioned today. One by me, one by Andrew. One, there is no AI easy button. Two, AI is not a silver bullet. Notwithstanding those two caveats, I'm excited. I'm an optimist. I do see the flame front of AI spreading across the Department of Defense. You hear it today in 4-star level conversations that didn't exist a year ago, that people are beginning to understand a little bit more every day what this could mean for the department. If you read the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy, they're both built into the artificial intelligence, big data, automation. So I'm excited about the future. It's hard work. It's going to take us a while to get there, but we can't afford to delay much longer.
Right. Lee.
I agree with General Shanahan. We see the integration of artificial intelligence into the mission side of the DoD is absolutely imperative. From the industry perspective, we see our adversaries using artificial intelligence, and we're doing everything we can with the DoD to accelerate that process.
All right, Margie?
Yeah, so I see a really exciting turn of focus, I think, in DoD and in this space where before cloud was an IT conversation, and you'd have a discussion around what that meant from an IT perspective, but we're really seeing it being pulled back into the mission side and looking at what kind of mission outcomes we can get from not just the cloud infrastructure piece, but also from the data and analytics. And I think it goes back to, the topic the General brought up around human-machine teaming. And when we really think about the potential of these technologies to be, team members with humans and doing warfare and making decisions, I think it'll change how we construct our design processes, our procurement processes, and really put us in a different place, not just from a technology perspective, but also from a culture and a process perspective that could really give us a competitive edge in the future.
All right. And Andrew, you get the last word.
Well, it's hard to add anything to that, right? I think I would go back to the beginning, is that cloud is a business model. It's it's technology. It's really how you apply IT now. It's not going away. And so whether we are doing AI or machine learning, or whether we're loading other types of capabilities on it in using IT, the only thing we have to realize is that the only thing that's, I guess, standard is it's going to change, and it's going to change fast. And so we have to learn how to grow quickly to respond to it and embrace it.
All right. Great advice from everyone. Unfortunately, though, we're out of time. You've been listening to panel discussion, New Frontiers in Military Intelligence, Artificial Intelligence, Machine Learning in the Cloud, sponsored by Microsoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I've been your host, Jason Miller. Let me thank my guests today. Lieutenant General Jack Shanahan, the Director for Defense Intelligence Warfighter Support in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Margie Palmieri, the Director of Digital Warfare Office in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations. Andrew Mansfield, the Technical Director for the Navy's Space and Naval Warfare Systems Center Atlantic, and Lee Madden, the General Manager of Defense for Microsoft. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search Microsoft.
On behalf of Microsoft, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will also receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.